This is So Prime Morning. My name is Esiodua Akumia. If you just joined in, thank you so much. Thank you to our guests once more for the Newsflash segment. And thank you to all of you who sent in your messages during the Newsflash segment. We really appreciate all of you. And apologies to the messages that were sent on our Facebook page. We'll do our very best to read them. Please do not worry. But please continue being highly interactive with us on all our social media platforms. Now it's time for us to delve into a different faction or a different aspect of today's edition of Prime Morning, and we definitely have to look at what is going on in the country now when it comes to goods and services, prices of goods and services on the market, and the effect that the Middle East crisis has on our energy sector. I do know that a lawyer and energy analyst, who is the person of Lom Nuku Ahlijah, has stated that government should do its very best to call for urgent diversification of Ghana's energy mix. We are going to speak with him to tell us or give us more in-depth understanding into what he means by this, and also have a look at the fact that the energy crisis, or what is going on with, the oil on the global market, and it's affecting our energy sector here in Ghana, also affecting other goods and services like transports, like water. Now there's the call of increments for, not the call, but now bags of water have been increased. Transport fares is also being increased, although government has stated that it should be stable for now. They should relax, they should, take their time. But drivers are concerned because fuel prices is on the rise. So what do we do? Ladies and gentlemen, joining us via Zoom, I have mentioned his name earlier, and he's in the person of Lom Nuku Ahlijah, who's a lawyer and also an energy analyst. Good morning.
Silva, I hope you're well.
I'm doing very, very well. I hope you are doing well too, and I hope you had a great Easter weekend.
Yes, I did.
Okay, we thank God for that. Now, you have called for government's urgent diversification of all that is going on in relation to the energy sector. Can you please throw some more light onto what exactly you meant by this?
Okay, so that call is in relation to the fact that presently, as a nation, we're dependent significantly on oil, both for transport and also for the power sector. So as you mentioned in the preamble, every change or, let's say, difference in price from the global price of oil will impact Ghana directly.
Right.
So as you mentioned, it affects transportation. Once it affects transportation, obviously, that also goes to impact food prices. It has the effect on inflation and so on. And on the power side, significant portion of our energy that we use for electricity is also driven by the price of oil and its related products like gas and heavy fuel oil and so on.
Yeah.
So to the extent that we depend heavily on oil in the energy sector in Ghana, it means that the country is susceptible to shocks that are driven by changes in the price. At the start of the U.S. Israel-Iran conflict, we're looking at oil being $60 a barrel. Today, we are around $110 a barrel. So that's a significant increase in less than a month. So you can see that until, as a nation, we've diversified our energy sector, in other words, we've brought in other sources of fuel to drive the nation's energy sector, will continue to be susceptible to the shocks that are coming from increases in prices of oil. And in terms of diversification, we are looking at other sources of fuel like renewable energy, solar, wind, obviously waste to energy, anything that is renewable that can be driven by an infinite source rather than depending solely on oil. Of course, Ghana also has been looking at nuclear for some time now, and plans have been ongoing for several years, in fact decades now. And it is time, I think, to accelerate plans so that we can have more options rather than be heavily dependent on oil and related products. Because for so long as a country is heavily dependent on this particular fossil fuel, we always have the challenge where the country will be affected when they are changing the price in the global market.
So yesterday on my sister on our sister's show, you did mention on the AM show, you did say something. You did say that Ghana's continued reliance on imported fuel is going to leave it at high. Is going to make it highly exposed to external shocks. What can we do as a country to prevent us from highly depending on imported fuel?
Okay, so as I indicated, we have a few options. In Ghana, for example, studies have been done by the Energy Commission and several, if I should say, development parties, which confirm the fact that we have a very good location as far as solar energy is concerned.
Okay.
So across the country, when it is a dry season particularly, the sun quality in this part of Africa is very good.
Okay.
And even in the rainy season, we have significant amount of sunshine, which powers solar energy. We have in Ghana, for example, a renewable energy master plan developed by the ministry in conjunction with the Energy Commission and the various players in the energy sector. And in that plan, we intend to increase, let's say, the renewable energy within our energy space. But not much is happening there as we speak.
Okay.
Today. So already the plan is there, but it's about execution. We need to encourage individual homes to go more solar. Businesses that, for instance, require energy needs can diversify by including some solar in there. We have also rich wind resources that can drive wind vanes and windmills that can power electricity as well.
Okay.
Now, these are renewable energy sources where the fuel essentially is provided by nature. You don't require any money to buy sunlight. You don't require any money to get the wind. So it's about putting in an investment and driving the policies that will encourage individuals, businesses, and so on to adopt more renewable energy in their various spaces. And as well, the government is now taking the lead as far as government projects are concerned. Okay? We know, for example, that as part of the big push, along the routes, there will be some investments in healthcare facilities and so on.
Yeah.
Are these infrastructure going to be fitted, for example, with solar panels, so that they can be self-sufficient, not have to depend on the grid? Because for so long as we continue to connect them to the grid, presently as we speak, the grid is significantly powered by thermal plants. Thermal plants are dependent on oil. So these are some of the things that we need to be doing. Encourage more in that space. Now, it's not only about the encouragement or putting in the policies to drive it. Even the financing aspect is also key, because one of the barriers to people adopting some of these technologies
is the finances.
Yes, the upfront cost.
Yes. Yes,
Exactly.
I was going to ask you if you believe that this government is ready to put in the necessary resources, because it's brilliant if we are to start relying on solar energy because of the amount of sunshine we have throughout the entire year. So are we ready for this?
One of the signals, at least we've seen, is that the Ministry of Energy was designated as the Ministry of Energy and Green Transition, which is a new name which you've had for the first time.
Okay.
Now, the green transition element focuses on things like what I'm talking about. So at least we have the signal that perhaps the government is interested in driving renewable energy and alternative sources to power the nation. However, we need to go beyond that into execution. And as I mentioned, presently, we don't have enough of these as far as our national energy needs and resources are concerned. For example, we previously, as a nation, had a target to increase renewable energy in the generation mix, for example, by 10% by 2020. And we're in 2026 now. So you can see that we're already behind. And now we have plans to also do similar by 2030. And we're in 2026. So, like I said, the plan is there. We have a blueprint that has been developed by various governments over the years. And this current government also is working on that plan. But we need execution, so that we can see tangible results within the space. Then the more we diversify, the more we can release, as a nation, reduce our dependence on oil and fossil fuels and its impact on the other things that we've talked about.
Looking at the moves the government is currently making to try to do its very best to stabilize, fuel pricing for Ghana to not be too affected by what is going on externally, does it seem optimistic and promising to you in any way? What do you think about the steps and the processes that the government is going through now?
Well, we are yet to see the concrete responses from the government, because we know that the president has called for a cabinet meeting to discuss the way forward. So we wait for that major announcement from government on what the decision is in terms of the buffer, how to buffer the shocks that Ghana is likely to face. I think you mentioned earlier in the news review previously that for example, Ministry of Transport is having discussion with GBRT to keep the prices and so on. So at least we've seen some initial engagements and so on. However, we need major announcement of what has to be done, because in order to curtail the impact or reduce it on the nation, there are many things that will be at the disposal of government, including reduction of taxes, maybe taking off some levies. Of course, even the exchange rate situation also impacts directly the energy sector as well, which means that if there can be new interventions that will further reduce dollar to CD rate as well, that has to be considered. So I'll say that for now we can see some signs, but we need to wait for that major announcement on what government has decided to do, because one way or the other, if we don't take steps, the impact will be more significant, because at the time the budget was presented last year for 2026, there was no scenario that contemplated this conflict. And this has completely taken a lot of assumptions out of here, because as I mentioned, you can see that the oil price has increased from $70 to about $110, and that's a big jump, which was not contemplated at the time the budget was put in. We know that the OPEC countries have basically made a commitment to increase supply on the 1st of May.
Yes.
That can also reduce the price of the global the oil price, which may also then ease the pressure. So basically, what government needs to do is to do a lot of scenario planning. Assume it comes down, what does that mean? What do we do at that point? If, for example, even by increasing supply from OPEC, if the conflict continues and the price of oil goes to go up, what do we do? Because one way or the other, you have to anticipate and figure out what's the best course of action depending on how the scenarios change. And we expect that some major announcement will be done after that cabinet meeting is concluded.
Some of the things, or one of the things that Ghanaians were quite optimistic and happy about was the introduction of the fuel levy. And we were hopeful that it would help to stabilize what we're going through when it comes to our energy sector. But a number of us are still experiencing doomsday, one way or the other, which is rather unfortunate. And what do you make of the fuel levy, and not just that, some other taxes that have also been introduced?
Well, one of the things that I would say is a legacy issue in the energy sector is that we've had debt that has been accruing over the years. So things like the fuel levy, ESLA, all of that are attempts to raise money to be able to clear the arrears or pay off that debt. And every day that we are consuming energy in Ghana, that debt in one way or the other is increasing, which means that even though attempts have been made to pay it off, it is not being brought down to zero. Okay. So as I said, these are some of the kind of the discussions or calculations that government will have to make, because any time you take off a tariff or you take off a levy or a tax, it means you must find the money elsewhere.
Right.
And as I mentioned, this scenario that we are in now would not have been contemplated at the time the budget was being done. And any reallocation of funds also means that some other sector or some other area don't have the resources as scheduled. It could be health, it could be education, it could be agriculture, and so on. So there is a balancing act between reducing or keeping prices low as far as energy prices are concerned, transportation, and its effects on inflation and so on. But there's also the possible resultant impact on other sectors if funds are reallocated. And so it's a balancing act that government has to engage, which is why I'm saying there needs to be some major announcement after this cabinet meeting to let the country know what the options are, what action has been taken to do, because every reduction of a tax or levy or tariff impacts the bottom line of the country, and we need to find the money elsewhere for it. But you know that in terms of, let's say, the tax regime, the changes that were made between 2025 and today overall has a reduced impact. In other words, it's less than what was said before, which is good. Okay. However, because of this situation that has arisen, there may be a need to further consider some reduction or changes and so on. Or in terms of the kind of negotiations that government can do with its other nations and other development partners to ease the pressure on Ghanaians. But one of the key notes also, particularly at this time, is that it's not only Ghana or African countries that are impacted by this conflict.
Okay.
Even the West is really under this conflict. In fact, it's so bad that even Russia, which previously had been sanctioned and could not sell its oil to some of the Western nations, now has that sanctions lifted just so that they can also get crude because of the issue in the Middle East. So you can see that it's a very dynamic situation. It's a global situation. The impact is being felt everywhere, which means that even a dependence or support from some of the Western countries that we typically have been supporting us in the past may not come as anticipated. So it's about what Ghana will itself propose as a plan to deal with this issue.
Okay, Lom, thank you very much for your time. But before you go, I want you to quickly, say something or brush on the level of effect that this has had on most goods and services here in Ghana. Earlier, you started talking on it. I want you to, just brush on it a bit for me. We are looking at transportation. We are even looking at water now, the price increment for sachet bags of water and all that.
Yes, prior to the start of this month, at least the PRC announced some tariff for this particular quarter, and we saw a reduction as far as electricity was concerned, and even for water as well. So that was good. The good thing about that is that the tariff that has been announced by the PRC will give us a window of about 3 months.
Okay.
But if this situation continues, it means that for the next quarter, there may be some adjustment depending on what the situation will be. And that is also driven by the foreign exchange rates as well. So if these two, if I should say key inputs, that is the cost of fuel, and then also the exchange, dollar to CD exchange rate, are not dealt with critically, the impact will affect the power sector, obviously, in terms of what we pay for electricity at home or water. And then obviously it also will impact transport, because that's one of the biggest drivers for inflation. We know that inflation has been brought down so significantly. Now we're talking about 3.3%. But when the prices continue to go up, the transport fares are impacted and they increase, It will obviously also impact food inflation, and that also drives inflation generally in the country. So every attempt has been made to ensure that it doesn't happen. And as I said, there are not many options available to government, but they definitely need to consider all the options. And the Minister of Finance and his team would be to advise the president on the next course of action so that we wait to see what decision has been made. Because without it, the possibility of increasing inflation and increasing prices will become inevitable.
All right, Lom, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning on the show. Do have a wonderful day. And I've been speaking with Lom Nuku Ahlijah, who's a lawyer and also energy analyst. And we've been speaking on the effects that the Middle East crisis has on our energy sector. He has suggested that, government or the country starts looking into renewable energy and not solely relying on imported fuel, which you and I do believe and do agree that it is one of the best ways to channel. So we do not, rely heavily. And anytime there's an external issue, Ghana is not going to be affected drastically like the way we are being affected when it comes to the Middle East crisis.